Hi, and welcome to our Career Clarity event. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Thompson and I work at IBM. We're one of the partners that make up CWT Partnership, which stands for Connecting Women in Technology. The partnership currently has 5 company members. It's made up of Avaya, Dell, HPE, IBM, and Intel. We're really pleased to have you today at this event. If you're joining us live, it's the last one for the week. If you're listening to us as a recording, you may have done it in order, which means you are at the end. Alternatively, we hope you continue to listen to other sessions. This session is being recorded, so if you have any concerns about that, please log off now and look out for the replay link. However, we encourage you to stay on at the event because you're going to be off video and on mute. That doesn't mean you can't interact with us though. Please use the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be monitoring this throughout the session. So if you have any comments, technical issues, hopefully not, or just general feedback, please post it in the chat facility. We will be running some polls throughout the event and you'll see these pop up as we launch them. We will reference them, so look out for the pop-up and please take part by voting in the polls. These are anonymous, so don't be worried about your name appearing. There's also a call to action button whereby it's directing you to the Fresh Futures webpage. Please go and have a look at that after the event. And we've also got an Ask a Question menu at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, but so we don't lose them throughout the sort of activity, we encourage you to use the Ask a Question functionality. And at the end of the session, we'll try and get through those live with our speaker. So I'm not here on my own today. I am here with Jo Phillips from Fresh Futures Coaching, who is going to deliver the session today. And to make sure she has the full power of streaming, I'm going to go off video in a second, and she's going to do her introduction and continue to lead throughout. You may see me pop up or hear my voice again as we run polls or ask questions. And if not, at the very end, I'll come back just to close out the session in formality. So with that, I'm really excited to welcome Jo to the session. Thank her for her time and just hope everyone enjoys and encourages you to participate. Over to you, Jo.
Perfect. Thank you so much. What an eloquent introduction, Jen. Thank you. I feel very much like I understand exactly what's going to be going on. So I hope that's the same for everybody who is the other end of these cameras. Thank you all so much for joining me this afternoon. My name's Jo Phillips. I'm an executive coach and mentor. I'm a passionate women's champion. I've now worked for the last 25 years within the corporate world. The majority of that time within learning and development leadership. And I'm now being able to really fulfill my passion, which is to work with women in leadership, really helping them to achieve career clarity. And over the course of the next hour, what I wanted to do is have an opportunity to introduce you to the 4 cornerstones of career clarity. And this is really to give you a bit of a flavour, to give you some tips and techniques, to give you some thought processes, to give you something to sort of hang your hats on when you're thinking about your careers and where you want your careers to go, and perhaps what you want that career pivot maybe to look like. So oftentimes when I work with women, they will come to me maybe 10, 15 years into their career and say, look, I feel undervalued. I feel as though the gender pay gap certainly hasn't been closed in my particular scenario. I feel as though I would like a promotion, or I feel as though I'd like to move on, but I'm just not sure how to harness all of my skills, how to harness all of that experience and to really pivot and to move forward. So a lot of the work that I do is within organisations and one-to-one, really looking at what is career clarity for you. And before I go any further, what I'm going to ask you to do is in the chat for me, what I'd like you to do, if it's possible, is, what I'd like you to do in the chat for me, if that's possible, is just put in your names, but also put in something that you would do outside of work that nobody would be aware of. So, for example, if I was to put something in the chat, I would put that I'm Jo, and that what nobody would be aware of is that you will find me meditating all over the house. So if a little stream of sunshine comes in through the Velux, you will find me just sat for 5 minutes every so often, just kind of downloading and thinking about my day. So just pop something in the chat for us. And the reason really for that is I want to make sure that you're comfortable with the chat function. We're going to be using that across the course of the next hour. The idea of this session is that it's really interactive, and you can come off of mute and you can ask questions. You can dive into the chat and ask questions, and we can, of course, deep dive and really respond to your questions. So please feel free to put that in the chat. My hope is that Jen has also managed to put my coaching profile in the chat. So you should find that in the chat there's a coaching profile that will give you a lot more of an idea in terms of my background and what I've done and how I've really arrived at this point in my career, as it were. So in terms of the first place for us to start, we know that we're all here with CWT, and CWT is really about reconnecting post-pandemic, and it's about returning to that career focus. And actually, in a global survey that was undertaken, what we know is that 51% of women feel actually less optimistic about their career prospects than prior to the pandemic. And this global survey was undertaken by Deloitte. And there's an awful lot more to the survey, which I'm going to share with you shortly. But what I wanted to do in the first instance was just do a little poll of our own, just to identify and to find out where you are at the moment in terms of your careers. So there should be a poll that comes up shortly. And I think question number 1 on the poll says, do you feel that women face more barriers to career progression than men? So I'd invite you, first of all, just to answer that one for me, if that's possible. The second question on the poll is, which of the following do you think may negatively impact career progression? And we've got things like unhelpful gender stereotyping, unconscious bias from management, lack of part-time or job share opportunities, lack of visible female roles, lack of self-belief or confidence, or anything other. And again, you can feel free to specify. Question 3, have you ever experienced or observed unconscious bias in the workplace? And I guess the classic example is the whole female being overlooked for promotion. There's an unconscious bias around perhaps you have a family, perhaps you have other commitments. So have you ever experienced or observed unconscious bias within your workplace? Poll question number 4. What do you think would have the most positive impact on increasing the number of women in senior roles? So you've got support in returning to work after maternity, more senior roles offered as part-time or job share, more visible female roles, more active support for diversity and inclusion from men, training and coaching to support women in senior roles, or others. And again, you can feel free to comment. And then the last poll question for us, before we come on to some of Deloitte's findings, number 5, since the pandemic, do you feel under more pressure to perform? And that's a simple yes or no. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I can't see the polls and I can't see the responses. So I'm wondering, Jen, if we've had responses to those polls, would you be able to just give us the feedback on those questions, if that's possible?
Of course. So, yeah, really pleased to see the number of responses we've been getting. So to the first question about feeling the barriers to career progression, we've had 12 votes for yes, so at 75%, and 4 votes for no at 25%.
Yeah.
The second question around the impact on career progression, we've had 3 for unhelpful gender stereotyping, 2 for unconscious bias from management, 1 from lack of visible female roles, and 10 for the lack of self-belief and confidence. The third question, have you ever experienced or observed unconscious bias, has a full 16 votes in yes. The next question about the most positive impact has gone to 5 votes of more active support for diversity inclusion from men, and 9 votes for training and coaching to support women in senior roles. And finally, the last question about the pandemic, we've had 6 for yes and 7 for no.
Okay. So I think that's really interesting that actually what's come back, certainly under number 1, do you feel that women face more career barriers than men? Is 75% of us do. Most of my clients would say that their own lack of self-belief and their own lack of confidence and potentially a little bit of imposter syndrome also impedes them from being able to move on within their career and really understanding how to self-promote. And that's something that we're going to be talking about with these 4 cornerstones. Experiencing or observing unconscious bias in the workplace was a full house of 16. That's interesting. Don't need to say any more about that. And training and coaching to support women in senior roles, again, scored quite highly with 9 of you. So interesting to see those poll results. Now, what you're going to be able to do and download at your leisure is download the Deloitte report that some of these statistics I'm about to talk through have come from. So you can download those at your leisure. But I think to understand more about the impact of the pandemic on gender equality in the workplace, Deloitte Global conducted this survey, and there was 5,000 women across 10 countries between November 2020 and March 2021. And the survey probed several areas, and these were areas relating to work lives, including experiences during the pandemic and career expectations in the future. And respondents varied in age groups, and the data from the survey has also enabled analysis through intersectional lenses of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And in fact, what we know is that through the pandemic, women have taken on more responsibilities at home and at work, not receiving adequate support necessarily from all of their employers. Nearly 80% of surveyed women indicate that their workload at work has increased as a result of the pandemic. And at the same time, 66% of women report having the greatest responsibilities for home tasks, and more than half of those with children say that they handle the majority of the childcare duties. And of course, these mounting responsibilities take their toll on women's physical health, mental well-being, and career ambitions. And I'm just going to move on screen-wise. I'm going to take you just to here, which I forgot to do earlier, so sorry. If you wanted to pick up your phones and just pick up my QR code, that would allow you to have my details actually stored in your phone, because this is the kind of work that I do all day, every day. So feel free to do that. And I'm going to keep talking you through some of the respondents in terms of the report. And so what we know is that respondents within this Deloitte report actually found themselves in the perfect storm, because they've got more responsibility at home, heavier workloads, and there's also a damage to the relationship with their employers, because some employers just didn't understand. Added to this, respondents say they've got less time for outside interests and have experienced an adverse effect on their relationships with friends and partners. And it's no surprise then that this situation has affected women's health and their general optimism about the future. Only a third of women consider their mental well-being to be good or extremely good, compared to 68% before the pandemic. And only 41% rank their current physical health as being good or extremely good, compared with 68% pre-pandemic. So given this backdrop, the idea of the next hour, and I'm going to have to talk quickly because I've tried to add as much value for you as possible, so that we're going to be doing plenty of activities. Given this backdrop, what I wanted to do is actually have us visit the 4 cornerstones for career success. And again, you've got a few more statistics on there that I've just talked through, which is that 70% of women say that their job or workload has increased as a result of the pandemic. 66 have the greatest responsibility for household tasks, and 79% who care for dependents and other children have the greatest responsibility for domestic tasks within their home. So there are 4 cornerstones to career clarity. And the first cornerstone, and the place that we are going to go to immediately, is going to be to really know your values. And when I say know your values, I mean understand what are your values as an individual. What do you value and what do you align with now as a value in terms of the type of organisation that you want to work for? And actually, they may be very different values to what you aligned with maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So perhaps 5, 10, maybe 15 years ago, perhaps your values were maybe working for an organization that was progressive, whereby you could progress very quickly. Perhaps now your values are much more aligned to having flexibility and having autonomy. And we're going to have a little look at an exercise about values and about how when your values don't align with your employer, and I do that because it's a little bit like two ends of a battery. You know, if your values aren't aligning, that's where you will find that sometimes there can be a source of frustration within work. The second cornerstone that we're going to look at is future focusing. And by future focusing, I mean we need to really get busy on recognizing where we want to be when it comes to our retirement. And that might, for some of you, be 25, 30 years off. For some of you, it might be 10 years off. But actually what we want to do is really think about, okay, what do you want to be able to say when you hit your retirement? What do you want that speech to sound like? And from there, we then need to go to our third cornerstone, and that's to figure out our action plan. So actually, what is our action plan? What do we need to be doing in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years to achieve that retirement speech? And then the fourth and the final, and probably what's most important, is your ability to self-promote and to really believe in your skill set so that you understand your worth in the market and what that looks like to the outside world. And it's all about understanding our internal ecosystem, the one that works for us. And for that, you may need some assistance, which again is where I come in. So the first place that I'm going to ask us to go is to really think about our own personal values. And that is to think about the values that you hold dear. So let's think about some of the values, because actually you are integrally connected to your personal values, and your values will reflect what's important to you. And they're kind of a shorthand way, really, of describing your motivations together with your beliefs. And they're also casual factors that will, in fact, drive your decision making. So this little personal values assessment is a really simple little tool, and it takes just a couple of minutes of your time. And this, again, is why signing up to these types of sessions is worth it, because these are the kind of downloads and these are the assets that you can take away with you. And what I do is I bespoke these to career women so that you can actually really, really focus on your values to understand where you want to be. So for now, what I'm going to ask for you to do is just to look at the screen and just select from the screen 10 values. And I'm going to give you some time to make this selection. So I'd like you to select 10 values about who you are now, not where you want to be, but who you are now. So I'll give you some time just to select those values. And once you've selected those values and you've made a note of those values, if you can either just give us a thumbs up or an okay in the chat, and then that way I will know from a timing perspective if I can move on or if I just need to sit tight for a minute.
We haven't had any comments in the chat just yet, so if we can give everyone another minute or so, I'll let you know when we've got some of these ready.
So as you're choosing these and as you're reading through these values, what will start to come up is an internal dialogue. Is that important to me? Isn't that important to me? Should that be important to me? Shouldn't it be important to me? with any of these types of assessments, what I usually suggest that you do is go with how you feel as opposed to any logic that might be associated with it. Because what we're asking you to do is really look at these are kind of heart responses, as it were. So as you're looking at these personal values, select 10 that you feel align with you now.
So we've got, a flurry of okays and dones. So if you want to move forward, I think we're in a good place.
Thank you. Now what I'm going to do, for everybody who's the other side of the screen, now what I'm going to do is stretch you a little further. Sorry, I'm going to stretch you a little further. I'm sure it was fairly difficult to choose 10 values. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to choose the 3 that are most important to you. So what are the 3 values that are most important to you? And then I'm going to ask you to briefly jot down why they're important to you. And again, once you've done that, if you can chuck an OK or a thumbs up in the chat, that would be fab. So 3 values that are most important to you and why. And again, just to give you ladies, if you're feeling, you ladies and gentlemen, everybody the other side, if you're feeling slightly hurried by me, I apologise. What we're doing now is normally 90 minutes and more in a session with me, and we dig really deep. So if you're feeling a bit hurried, I understand it's because I'm trying to add as much value to today as possible. So if you've selected 3 that are most important to you, and you've made a note as to why they're most important to you, now what I want you to do is think about how you react when this value isn't honoured by others. So when this value isn't honoured by others, what happens for you? And against each of those 3 values, just write a word for me. You could even write a reaction. It might even be a face that frowns. But just briefly for me, what happens for you when how do you react when that value isn't honoured? Okay. We might be getting some okays in the chat, Jen. We might be getting some, yeah, I'm done.
Yep, there's a bit of activity. So
okay.
I think everyone's ready to move forward.
So for those of you who are looking at those 3 values and you're looking at your reaction when they're not valued, and again, you can just put a yes in the chat, you can stay quiet, you can come off mute. Has anybody found that you've found yourself perhaps frustrated or maybe feeling like you're at 2 ends of a battery because those values haven't been met, those values haven't been honoured when you've been in the workplace? And again, you're in a psychologically safe space. You can feel free to answer. Equally, you don't have to answer. It's just something maybe to consider. Have you found that you've perhaps been frustrated because other people haven't honoured your values? And again, we might have people wanting to come off mute. We might have people putting in the chat.
They won't be able to come off mute,
okay.
But everything, so direct everyone into the chat. But yeah, we're getting a couple of reactions, feeling demotivated, disengaged, annoyed and demotivated.
Yeah.
Thank you to those sharing their thoughts.
Yeah. So that you are not alone. So for anybody who is the other end thinking, well, I felt annoyed, frustrated, demotivated, you are not alone in what we will find, certainly as we progress through our careers, is that if our values aren't honoured by others, we will find that extremely frustrating and we will find it demotivating. And part of a career pivot is working out the values that you now want to work to, the values that you want to see honoured, and working within an organisation or with a team that will value and will honour those values. So I'd like you, again, going back to the list, just one more stretch on values before we move on. going back to the list, I'd like you to choose 3 values that you would like to live more fully. So 3 values that you would like to live more fully on that list. Three values you would like to live more fully that are on that list. And then think about what you could stop doing to better support those 3 values. So not necessarily what you could do, but what you could stop doing. So what are you doing to hold yourself back from living these further 3 values that are really actually intrinsically important to you? So what could you stop doing? So, for example, you might have picked on trust. I want to trust more. I want to be able to trust my team more. I want to be able to trust my leadership more. Okay, so what are you stopping? How are you stopping that trust happening? How are you playing small in that scenario? How much communication are you responsible for not delivering? How often are you questioning the wording that's being given to you as opposed to trusting the wording? And some of this stuff is deep. You know, there's a lot that we dig up when we're in a coaching session. There's a lot that we talk through. But the idea is that from this session, you can take away 3 values that you would like to live more, and then really consider, what are you doing to stop yourself living those values? And what could you start doing to demonstrate working more fully towards those values? And whilst from a time perspective, we don't have time this afternoon to complete the entire exercise. And as I've said, usually I would work one-on-one, and this is at least 90 minutes with some pre-session work and some post-session work. But actually what this gives you is a little bit of a flavour as to the importance of your values, and in fact the depths that we need to reach into ourselves to be able to start to create that sense of self for the next 20 years, and actually what's important for you and your career for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So could you just give Jen a little yes or a thumbs up or an okay in the chat if you feel like that has been beneficial for you, or if you feel like, oh, actually, yes, that's at least got the mind ticking for this afternoon, just so I can gauge where we're at, if that's possible.
Yep, we've got a thumbs up. So
We've got a thumbs up.
Yeah. Oh, yep. Very useful. Thank you.
Anybody got any questions around personal values just before we move on? Anybody got anything they want to ask?
The thumbs up are flooding in, which is great to see. No questions just yet, but we'll give it a bit just in case anyone's typing.
Okay.
No questions, so I think happy to proceed.
Fab. So where I'm going to take you then, ladies, is we're going to go to your retirement party. And this is cornerstone number 2. So 1 was values, to really very deeply understand your values and what you want to live more throughout your career in terms of values. 2nd is to get your party shoes on and have a bit of fun. And what I want us to do is I'm going to future focus you. I'm going to take you to your retirement party. And the reason that I take my clients to their retirement party at one point or another, or sometimes on multiple occasions as we work through together one-to-one, is because it's so important to understand where you want to be. Oftentimes as women within our careers, we are subliminally told where we want to be. We future focus on the basis of, well, maybe I might be able to get there. as opposed to I'm absolutely on my way. Sometimes we don't have an end destination. We just go along with the journey. And the retirement party is a really powerful little exercise to think about, actually, where do I want to be? You know, when I'm clinking champagne glasses, I'm clinking my orange juice glass, where do I want to be? So I want us to think about what this picture looks like for you. So there are some questions that I ask. So for everybody who has just mentally arrived at their retirement party, have a look around the room. Feel free to close your eyes. Nobody's watching you. Close your eyes and think about who's there. Who is at that retirement party? Friends, family, current work colleagues, leadership. Who's there? And more importantly, what are they saying about your career? Are they saying, I'm sure they're saying huge complimentary speeches. I'm sure they're talking very passionately and very warmly about your career. And actually, as you listen to them, and as you're about to raise your champagne glass and you're about to do your speech, how does your speech sound? Is what you're saying at your retirement party, if you stayed where you are now, if you do nothing more in your career, is what you're saying at your retirement party what you want to say? Or when you listen to your own speech, is there anything missing? And oftentimes at this point, what I find with clients is that they will say, goodness me, Jo, there's plenty missing from my retirement speech. When I think about it, if I lift away those mental barriers, if I don't think about the competition of anybody to get a leadership role, if I don't think about any times that I've gone for a promotion previously and I got knocked back for whatever reason, if I remove any of those mental barriers, actually, there's a lot more that I want to be doing. So what I'd like you to do, again, I told you we're going to be doing exercises right the way through this. Have a think about 3 elements of the speech that are currently missing. So if the trajectory that you are on isn't one that will give you the speech that you require, then I'd like you to have a think about 3 elements of that speech that are missing. So perhaps you want to be in leadership before you retire. Perhaps you want to upskill. Perhaps you want to career pivot. Perhaps you want to do some further career education. Perhaps what's important to you now is a portfolio CV. Perhaps what you want to do is condense your hours and work on a Friday in a completely different role. Perhaps you want to do voluntary work. Perhaps you want to have one day committed to self-study. The idea is that we just sit back, think about that retirement speech and what's missing from it now. If you were to stay on your current trajectory, what's missing? And for some of you, there might not be anything missing, which is fantastic. For others, this might be the first opportunity you've had to really sit back and think carefully and to clarify what is missing. Okay. So oftentimes my clients will say to me, Jo, I don't know what's missing. I just know that this job is no longer enough for me. I'm not getting that sense of achievement from the job. In a similar way, you know, Jamie Oliver talks about supermarket shopping, and he says that we shop with our eyes shut. So we just buy the same groceries every week because that's just what we've done for years. And in many ways, for some of us, we kind of coast or we've got to a point where we coast within our roles and we can do the job with our eyes shut. We don't necessarily get back that sense of satisfaction or get back that sense of value, but we do it because it's just what we're used to doing. And career pivoting is all about being able to say, well, actually, what do I really want now? For the next 20 years, what am I building towards? What do I really want? And like I say, for some of you, you may well be, on the trajectory that you're very comfortable with. For others of you, this is cornerstone number 2, and this is really looking at, okay, now I understand my values, where do I want to be? And that might be, if you go back to your values, it might be that when you then look at your values, you see, and also think about the retirement party, you might be thinking, the role I'm in, the organisation I work for no longer align to my values. So in fact, when it comes to the retirement party, there's something here that I need to pivot, something here I need to alter. So again, I will ask Jen, because I've talked and talked, but I will ask Jen again, in terms of that, in terms of the chat, if I can ask everybody just to put in a yes or a thumbs up if that's given you something to think about in terms of your retirement, if it's given you something to think about in terms of your career trajectory.
Nothing just yet, but bit of a delay. So
it's fine.
Yep, we've got our first thumbs up, so I'm sure there'll be a few to follow.
Fine. So in terms of that career trajectory, there will be elements that you want to work on. There may well be gaps that you think that you need to work on and to spend some time looking at. And one of the key exercises that we do when I work one-to-one is to look, okay, now we understand where we want to be when it comes to our retirement party. Let's now reverse focus. So let's imagine that we're at our retirement party. What were the steps that we took to get here? And the idea is that to achieve some clarity over your steps, what you would do after this session is you take yourself off, I don't know, in the back garden if it's not raining, or you take yourself off for 10 minutes with a cup of tea and actually look at, okay, if I want to get to that place for my retirement, what does my 10-year plan need to look like? What do I need to have achieved at the end of 10 years? And to achieve that by the end of 10 years, what do I need to have done by the time I hit the end of 5 years? Which means that by the time I hit the end of 3 years, I will have needed to have completed, which means that this time next year, I need to be doing. So the idea is that we kind of reverse focus and we go back 10, 5, 3, and 1. And what you should then start to be able to see as you put this together, and again, this is something that I do one-to-one with clients over the course of a few sessions, is we really dig deep in terms of, okay, this is what you want your end goal to be. So to give you some examples of some of the clients I'm working with at the moment, one of my clients said, look, my end goal by the time I retire is I want to be in a senior leadership position in the next 10 years. And by senior leadership, I mean global. So when we reverse that back, what it meant is that in the next 5 years, we need to be in a position whereby that's very easy to access. So that means that there's a whole skills base under there, and there's a whole load of networking, and there's lots of reach that we need to achieve in order to be able to have that as an attainable goal. And what that meant for the 3 years is that we needed to be EMEA plus. And for the 1 year, what that also means is we need a promotion quite quickly. And that client, in fact, has actually just achieved their promotion. And yesterday I got a WhatsApp saying that she's just got a 43% pay rise. So we are on our way to where we need to be. But the idea of this plan is, say, for example, you were thinking, well, look, actually, in 10 years' time, what I want is a portfolio CV. I want to be working 3 full days a week. And those other 2 days, I want to be, I don't know, working for myself, or I want to be working on a voluntary basis, or I want to be whatever it is you might do. The idea is that you then reverse focus and you say, okay, so what does that mean I need to be doing in 5 years? Where does that leave me with finances? What does that mean I need to do from an education perspective? What do I then need to be doing in 3 years? And what do I need to be doing in 1 year? And the idea is that we lay it all out in stepping stones. Now, in order to help you to do that, that brings us to our third cornerstone. And our third cornerstone is to really identify what you need to do, what needs to happen within that plan. And this is where we kind of drill down and we dig deep into the detail. What do you need to be doing? What do you need to know? Who do you need to know? How do you extend your reach? What do you do with your network? This is now really where we start to put much more detail around the plan. And this is actually a fantastic tool that I use with lots of clients, as simple as it looks. And I'm hoping that it's available for, that you can download it. Is it available for download, Jen? Or I can always send it on and it can be sent out to people.
It should be going out on email to everyone after the session.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much for that. So what you can see in front of you is your career clarity wheel. And some of you may have seen this before. If you've done any coaching in the past, you may have seen this. It's a wonderful tool that helps you to work with scale. So what we'll imagine is that the other end of the cameras, and I'm not sure who's the other end of the cameras or whereabouts you're based, but what we'll imagine is that on your notepads, or you've scribbled down or somewhere, you've started to put down some different actions that you would need to work towards in order for you to achieve that 10, 5, 3 and 1 year plan. And you'll probably have them as headlines at the moment. And the idea is that within our career wheel, within our pivot wheel, what we do at the very top is we put in those spokes, as it were, we put in our headlines. So you might have a spoke for personal development. You might have one for changing your leadership style. You might have one for the ability to self-promote, for example. And the idea is that what you would then do is, using your wheel, you would put those headlines in. So, for example, has anybody got a headline that they're willing to share? You don't have to, but for example, if you wanted to put it in the chat, you could put in a headline that you're willing to share, and I'm going to show you how to use this. And these are all the tools that I would use, usually one-to-one. And I'll show you how to use this and just what a powerful tool it can be for you to achieve clarity. So is anybody willing to share anything in the chat at all, even if it's just a one-liner?
Everyone's gone shy.
They've gone quiet. That's fine. So if I was to say to you in the first, for example, in the first cheese, as I like to call them, or pizza slice, I could put in there ability to self-promote. So I might know that actually one of the things I need to do is self-promote more. When I'm in a room of peers, when I'm in a room of leaders, when I'm in a room of opportunities, I need to self-promote in order to get that promotion. So self-promote goes as the headline. And what I can then do is I can scale myself and I can say, okay, so where am I at the moment out of 10 for self-promotion? And a 1 would be, I'm terrible. I will, kind of virtually hide in the corner and be very quiet. I tend not to say anything. And a 10 would be, I'm out there. I'm a self-promoter. I'm always talking. People know what I do. And the idea would be is that you would scale yourself. So, for example, if you were to put yourself at a 7 for self-promotion, what you would then do is think about, so what do I need to do to hit an 8, to just go up 1 scale? So, for example, could I think about, if a 7 at the moment for self-promotion is I'm pretty good, people mainly know what I do, but actually there's a whole team, when I think about it, that are aligned to my team, really don't know a lot about what I do. Well, I could move up 1 in the scale if I was to self-promote more within that team, just for example. You might have, and I'll move on from self-promotion, you might have another cheese or a headline as personal development. So again, a 1 for personal development might be, now that's right on the back burner. And a 10 would be, yes, I've done 250 hours already this year. Well, where are you on that scale in terms of personal development, and what would help you to achieve that personal development? What could you do to get to the personal development that you need, to add those skill sets, to add that knowledge, so that you can then look to self-promote in another way? And the idea is that what you'll find is that all of these are interlinked. But it's a really powerful little tool for you to use to help you to really get down to the minutiae of what you need to do within your day-to-day careers to start to work along that 1, 3, 5 and 10 year game plan. Okay. So has anybody got any questions for me on that, or would anybody like me would like to maybe put in or talk about one of their headlines? I think I've asked this previously anyway, so if you didn't want to, that's absolutely fine. It's just an ask whilst I'm here.
So we did get a couple of ideas. Someone said their segment might be around upskilling, someone finding a more creative role, someone talking about work-life balance, needing to get a rebalance between the work since the pandemic and boundaries. So yeah, a few ideas have been coming in as you've been talking. So I think as you've been giving examples yourself, it's been food for thought.
Perfect.
No questions at the moment on that, but no.
And I think, Jen, work-life balance is a really big one that I see all of the time with my clients. And I think, we see these things, don't we, online, and we see these things on LinkedIn and on Facebook and wherever, and it says, we've all got the same 24 hours. Therefore, we should all be able to make the most of it. And it's not true. We don't all have the same 24 hours. Some of us are raising small children. Some of us have caring commitments. We're squeezed in many different ways these days, and this work-life balance comes up a lot. And I think for those of you who are looking to achieve work-life balance, what we will need within your wheel, as one of the headlines, is the ability to say no. And another one will be boundaries. So the ability to say no is something that we have to champion ourselves as women, and we have to be so comfortable with saying, do you know what, thank you so much for the opportunity of actually putting that work forward to me. At the moment, from a schedule perspective, that's something that perhaps I could come back to over the course of the next quarter. At the moment, from a schedule perspective, that probably isn't going to fit my way. And actually within the cheese, as it were, or the pizza slices, really think about what your ability is to say no and how you say no. When was the last time that you could have said no, but you didn't because you thought, it's just easier to say yes? But actually what that did is that put another 3 hours workload onto your week. So the ability to say no is important, and boundaries. How do you set your boundaries? When you're working with team members, when you're working with leadership, what do your boundaries look like? Do they know your boundaries? Oftentimes we come away frustrated because we feel like our boundaries have been overstepped. But in fact, if you were to scale yourself, how deeply and in how much detail do you explain your boundaries? So it's just really giving that some detailed thought in terms of work-life balance. So thank you, whoever added that. I think that's a good point that I did mean to mention. So thank you so much for that. So we've done 3 career cornerstones, and I'm just conscious of time. We've got about 12 minutes left of our session. We've done 3 career cornerstones. We started with our values. So just to recap, what's super important is to understand that you're not alone if you're feeling frustrated, undervalued, or frankly underwhelmed with your job. What will have happened is that your values have changed. It's natural. It happens to millions of women. And certainly when they're at career pivot, their values have changed. And that means like 2 ends of a battery with their employer. It doesn't feel right. And that's because those values aren't being honoured. They're not being listened to. So that's just something to consider about whether or not perhaps now is the time to start thinking about living those values more. And really just to think about, actually, what am I doing to stop myself living the values that I want to live? How am I playing small in that scenario? And by playing small, I mean, have I looked up over the pulpit and thought, actually, there's other work out there, or have I sat tight? The second career cornerstone is to really future focus. So once you understand your values and the values that you want to live, we're not doing this twice, unfortunately. The values you want to live for the next 20 years, once you understand those, what does your retirement party look like? And is the trajectory that you're on the right one? And it may well be for some of you that it is. But for some of you, it may well feel uncomfortable when you think about your retirement party, because what you realise is this isn't the trajectory that you want to be on. You're not quite in alignment with where you want to be. So really think about that retirement speech, really think about where you want to be and what you want to do, and think about 3 elements that you would add to that retirement speech. Once you've got those 3 elements, that's where you then pick up your pivot wheel, and you can then that's where you then go to your 1, 3, 5 and 10 year plan. And that's where you then reverse focus. Okay, to get to 10 years, what will I need to do? And work back. And then your pivot wheel is where you then put in your minutiae. Okay, what do I need to do? What's my scale? And how could I move up 1 in that scale? How could I self-promote better? How could I achieve a better work-life balance? What could I do to say no? How am I communicating my boundaries? If that's what's on your wheel. For others, it will be a pay rise. One lady that I worked with came to me and said, look, Jo, by the end of 12 sessions, I just want a 20% pay rise. I don't want a promotion, but I know within my bracket, I'm way down. So that's where I want to be. So again, whatever your trajectory is, anything is possible. It's just about understanding actually, where do I want to be? And then your very 4th cornerstone is really about your ability to believe in yourself and your confidence when it comes to asking for what you need within the workplace. And actually understanding what your worth is in the market and what your worth looks like to the outside world is integral to you achieving what you want by the time you hit retirement. And the women I work with, the work that I do is to help support and to assist women to achieve their goals and their ambitions. So my job, whenever I work with a woman, is to help her to get to wherever she wants to be. But it's about digging deep. It's about using these 4 career cornerstones. And that 4th cornerstone is helping you to understand how to no longer play small. How do I now play big? How do I now step into this role that I know I'm capable of, that I know I can more than achieve? And for those of you who are playing small, I'll tell you how to identify if you're playing small. And it will be because you've looked around that somebody else has been promoted and you know that you've done more than them. And you think to yourself, how did they get that promotion? And that's because they were good at self-promoting and they put themselves out there. And perhaps we've held back for various reasons. So that 4th cornerstone is really understanding yourself and what you've done or haven't done in order to self-promote and to get yourself out there and to really have the confidence to do so. And again, a lot of the work that I do is helping women with their confidence to really to be able to go out and get what they want. So I thought it might be helpful to just talk to you about one of the clients that I'm working with at the moment. So this is the Fresh Futures website. And this is from one of the execs at IBM. So when I first met her, she was tired, confused, undervalued in an EMEA sales role, felt lethargic about the next 20 years of her career, and really wanted to gain a sense of control over her future and to start to feel just more confident in all areas of her life. And her specific goal was to gain a new role in a more senior position, although felt lacking in confidence and momentum. And after just 5 sessions, she messaged me and said, look, I feel really motivated. I feel keen to embrace my career future. I can't believe how you've managed to hook onto my answers in session and challenge my own perceptions of me. I've used a range of techniques with her and she's now starting to believe in herself again and can now see her worth, and she's ready to go and get that new role. So I work with women, for women, and I'm an experienced executive coach and mentor with 20 years industry experience, having worked in L&D, and my passion is to support you to achieve those dreams and to really achieve what you perhaps never thought was possible. So the website is Fresh Futures Coaching. Hopefully you've got my details, and I'm very happy to have further conversations with anybody who's come along today but would like some further assistance. And I think just from a time point of view, we're probably running about 5 minutes or so early. So I will open the floor to questions or any comments. Open the chat to see if anybody wanted to ask anything or wanted me to go back to any slides in particular.
So we do have one question already.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't take a note of the slide we were on, but the question was, is there an optimal number of values? So this is when we were starting to choose 10 and then slowly whittling it down. So
yeah. So is there an optimal number of values? The thing is, if we're really honest, every one of us could look at all of these values on the screen and think at some point they've probably been important to us. So the reason that we go for 10 is because it just starts to narrow down actually what our values are, and it asks us to really think about what's most important to us. And the reason that we then slice that down by a third is because actually when we start to use these values to look for employers or to look for teams or to look for leadership that will live these values, it means that we've got some real specifics to be able to have as a barometer, to make observations around, to understand from people who work in that team whether or not those values are adhered to. So a classic value for a working mummy will be flexibility. And what happens is that we go for interview and the leadership say, listen, we're totally flexible. You work the hours that work for you as long as the work's done. And what we would then do is we would ask to speak to people in the team and we would say, great, the value of flexibility, what does that look like? And of course, that then gives us, hopefully, exactly the same response. And the idea is that by selecting the values that we want to work further towards and closer to, then helps us really to filter out and to sift out where we really want to be, whether it be organisation, team, or potentially another, or potentially a promotion or another organisation. So I'm hoping that answers the question. Difficult, isn't it, without audio? Let's just see if that's answered the question or not.
It does for me, but I'll give them time to come back. Someone did say alongside, as that question was posted, just a comment, some of the values are outcomes and some are actions. So, for example, being liked is more of an outcome in that person's mind. So how do you see that?
Mm-hmm. So if I was working with an individual that said that being liked was a value that they wanted to work to, I think I would really want to understand why that was of importance and where that fitted, because again, that can have an impact on our leadership skills, that can have an impact on how we move people through teams. And I think you could read lots of these as values or as outcomes, balance, work and home. Is it an outcome? Is it a value? So yes, I would answer that and say, yeah, absolutely. It's just about what do we want to do more of and what do we want to do less of, and then really understanding why. And once we've got those, then we can start to think about, well, actually, does this role really fit for us still? Are all these values the same? And very often they change. Very often what we want now is very different to what it was 10 years ago.
Great, thank you. So we've got one more question. This might need to be the last one for timing, but we'll see if we get any others as we're talking. So the question is, how often would you encourage revisiting or refining the 10-5-3-1 year plan? Did I say all the numbers?
So in terms of revisiting, I think that if we stick so rigidly to a plan, as we know, plans are what we make whilst life happens, aren't they? Different things happen that are out of our control. So what we would generally do is look to revisit annually. Am I on course? If I am, perfect. If I'm not, why? And actually, have my needs changed? Has something else happened within life? Because again, that's very real, is that various circumstances change our trajectory. So I think, to answer your question, it's important to look at it 20 years prior to retirement, but it's equally just as important to look at it at least annually. Where am I against those the smaller steps that then create the bigger stepping stones, and they create the change in the trajectory. So I would look at it once a year, but I would equally be very open to that trajectory changing, to your needs changing, to your values shifting, because again, this all depends on what's going on around you. Wondering if that's answered the question.
All right. believe so, or it did for me. So thank you very much. Well, I'd say that was perfect timing. We are right on 2:30 for those that are with us live. So for that, I just want to say a huge thank you, Joe, for being our last session. A great way to end our CWT live event this week. And as you mentioned, we'll be making sure the website, the coaching profile, the wheel and everything is emailed out to everyone, so they've got those assets as a follow-up. And with that, I'd just like to wish everyone a good afternoon, and we'll hope that you see everyone at another future CWT event in the near future. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.